Welcome to the Red Kingdom. You're listening to Conservative Cat Cities 92.9. We've got so much to get to. I do want to get to Bloomington incentivizing this multifamily housing. The city of Bloomington is pushing for multifamily housing. I told you this, and they were going to, mess around with the zoning, the single family zoning, and that they were going to make it more they were going to make it easier for multifamily housing. Now, after this meeting, I am convinced that it's more than just trying to make it easy with the zoning. They're going to do tax credits for developers to build and to push this multifamily housing. New single family homes, I guess, are too expensive to build, or at least the profit margins aren't there for the developers. And really, this is your government getting in bed with the developers, so that way the developers can then turn around and donate to their campaign coffers. That's really what this is about. The city plans to create a program, or at least this is what was talked about in this committee of the whole meeting on April 21st. So the city of Bloomington, they're pushing for this multifamily housing. I told you that they're probably not going to zone single family very much anymore. Or they're going to do whatever they can to make it to where developers build the multifamily housing. And because the profit margins are higher, you can charge somebody, you will own nothing and you will be happy. And they're going to charge you, these corporate landlords, a ton of money to live in these terrible apartments. And, I love how in the presentation, we'll get to this, they pointed to Lincoln Lofts as a great example, and they use this as an example. You go on Google and you look at their reviews. I mean, Lincoln Lofts, they have a 2.5 star rating. It doesn't get much lower than that. Okay. People, and Jenna Kern, she even pointed out that she has heard from residents there and they don't really like living in the Lincoln Lofts. Okay. Do you really want to raise a family in these high-rise apartments, skyscraper looking buildings? Do you want to move to Bloomington if you work there? Okay. And they talk about this commuter, the EDC, Patrick Hoban. They've been talking about this commuter tax loss. So I guess we lose a bunch of taxes and property taxes. They want that commuter tax money. Okay. And here is the bottom line. And I can't stress this enough. American culture has always been this way. You will never get those commuters. Why? Because it's an American culture thing where they commute into work. Okay, 20, 30 minutes, they commute into work and they don't want to live in the city, but they prefer their suburb lifestyle. Okay, Bloomington is getting to be a pretty large city and nobody wants to live in Bloomington. Who works in Bloomington, they want to live on the outside of Bloomington, because that is the way Americans have always done it. And it's the way they're going to continue to do it, because they want to raise the 2.5 kids with the picket fence and the golden retriever out in the suburbs. Okay, this is the way American culture is. They're idiots, okay, and they don't understand that. And they want the commuters to come in to go live in high-rise apartments that won't fit their 2.5 kids and their golden retriever. Okay. They want them to go live in the Lincoln Lofts, people who work in Bloomington. And I'm sorry, but I don't think anybody would move to Bloomington if it meant living in a place like the Lincoln Lofts. And that's what they're trying to do. So I'm going to get to this clip. BLN News, they've got the story. They've got the graphics. They're trying to get this tax income. So they project the taxes from the commuters. If they would get more taxes from the commuters, they're estimating, at least this is the EDC Patrick Hoban's numbers, $31.24 million from commuters if they were to move into Bloomington. That's their property tax, their sales tax, their food and beverage, their liquor taxes, their motor fuel tax. If they were to move into Bloomington, we'd get that. That's what the government wants. They want that sweet, sweet, sweet money. They're like, ooh, the commuter tax money. We want it. How do we get it? And this whole idea of multifamily is not how you get it, because at the end of the day, you're never going to get those commuters. Why? Because it is it's rooted in a cultural thing. Americans, they like the golden retriever in the suburb life 20 minutes outside of the city. You're never going to get those people. No matter how many tax breaks you give these developers. We're going to get to that here in just a second. I do want to tell you what is planned for the rest of the show. The 6 o'clock hour at the Liberty Justice Center. This is like a legal center, and they're seeking damages and legal reform to prevent future property seizures in Illinois. I'll tell you about a story with First Supply LLC. They are the ones at the crux of this suit, this company, and they're suing the Winnebago County Sheriff's Office and the state's attorney's office, accusing them of unlawfully seizing and holding a delivery truck, despite that company having no involvement in an auto accident. So we're going to get to that. Plus, I do want to get to the Medicaid riots or protests, whatever you want to call them, the screaming or the chaos just to create chaos. That's what I tell you about those leftist counter protesters. I saw it firsthand at the Charlie Kirk event. These lefties, what they do, they go out and they just don't even know exactly what they're protesting. And it's kind of hilarious. They didn't schedule a meeting with Darin LaHood because they don't actually want to see change, because there's nothing to change. They're not really cutting Medicaid. So you're screaming about really nonsense. They're not cutting Medicaid. Donald Trump has said that more than once. And what they're doing is they are eliminating waste and fraud. So that way, people who need to be on Medicaid, the vulnerable communities, the people who Medicaid is intended for, they get their benefits, and not, a 120-year-old man who doesn't exist, or fictitious people who collect Medicaid. Okay. So we're cutting the fraud. We're eliminating the fraud. We're getting rid of the waste. It's not cutting Medicaid for people who are supposed to have Medicaid. No, illegals aren't going to get Medicaid. Okay, so are you really protesting eliminating waste and fraud within Medicaid payouts, federal spending? Are you really protesting that? So these protests erupted over Medicaid spending in Uptown Normal, Darin LaHood's office. Their staff left, naturally, because Darin LaHood, had a schedule, and he had other people on the schedule, other constituents. He's got 21 counties in his district, and he was traveling. And I love how the protesters outside, they were like, "Where's Darin LaHood? Where is he?" He's on his schedule, and he's meeting with constituents who are on his schedule. Did you even attempt to get on his schedule to talk with him about cuts to Medicaid? Although the cuts are fictitious and real, they're not real. It's fake news. Okay, there's no cuts happening to true Medicaid. We're talking about eliminating fraud and waste. In fact, people who are receiving benefits, Medicaid benefits, are probably going to wind up getting more Medicaid, in that you got more federal spending that you can allocate to the people who deserve Medicaid, are supposed to be on Medicaid. All right, let's get to Bloomington, shall we? We need to play this. This is Jenna Kearns, and I was telling you about how Jenna Kearns brought up the Lincoln Loft. So in this meeting, I highly recommend you go watch the meeting. They use the Lincoln Lofts as an example, as to something that they would provide tax incentive for, or waive fees for these developers to make it easier for them to build something like the Lincoln Lofts. Let's take a listen. Here we go. Oh, here we go.
Note to just say it out loud. We tend to use Lincoln Lofts as an example, and on paper, it is a wonderful example of how we can get affordable housing into our community. The reality of Lincoln Lofts has been less than it's been frustrating for the people who live there. They're, like the way it got put together, the issues that residents experience can be frustrating. And so if there are just some mechanisms that we can put in place to kind of shepherd those things along, or check in about those things, just so that we're not dealing with on the back end, now that residents are dealing with subpar, and these are not just to kind of to look out for that. So it's not something that, I want to celebrate Lincoln Lofts, but I know that there's struggles there. All right, thank you.
So she acknowledged that Lincoln Loft residents are unhappy. And why is that? Okay, at the bottom, at the crux of this, the root cause of this is when you pack people like sardines in a can right on top of each other in a multifamily housing unit, like a huge apartment complex. You're going to wind up with unhappy people. Okay. We're just not designed to be that way. Human beings need space to run. Okay. They need space for their families. They need space for their kids, for their dog to be happy. Okay. They just bottom line, human beings are not meant to live on top of each other like that. Number one. Number two, corporate landlords. Okay, this is what they're going to be providing tax credits, or they're going to be eliminating fees for these corporate developers who are going to be coming in and building these multifamily housing units. When you have these corporate developers, they're removed from the resident, okay, the tenant, because it's just big and they've got a ton of tenants, and they're not going to prioritize their tenants because they're prioritizing profits. Okay, this is what happens when you've made it impossible in this state for Joe, the landlord, the just regular guy who's living in Bloomington and has a few units, and is trying to be a small little a landlord. This is what happens when you make it impossible for him to do business here in the state by putting all kinds of red tape on him, like, hey, you have to take Zelle or Venmo. You can't charge the 1% processing fee on the tenants for running their credit card or for their debit cards. You can't charge a processing fee, but Joe has to eat that cost now. So then he's going to raise the rent. And, this is the fault of Democrats. The unaffordability in these communities, it's all because of Democrats, state Democrats, local Democrats. And on top of it, there's part of this is you don't want to live in the city. Yes, you're going to have commuters. Why? Because that's the way the American culture is. You're trying to bring these commuters in to live in the city of Bloomington. It's just not going to happen. I know you want that sweet, sweet tax money. Chill. Okay, why don't you just use the tax money you have? You have plenty of it. Okay, I don't think I need to tell you that. You pay Bloomington taxes. McLean County, you pay higher than the statewide averages of property taxes. I don't think I need to tell you that the government has plenty of money. They don't need any more. They need to fix their spending. Okay, and they need to stop being so greedy. Leave the commuters alone. It's all right if we have some commuters who commute into Bloomington. Oh, it's just outrageous to me. And it's all about you're going to see a slow, quiet ban on single family housing. They've already tried to do it at the state level, quite literally issue a ban on single family housing for large, dense populated areas. They're trying to issue bans on single family housing already. And that's not going to fix the housing crisis because, like I said, culturally, there's not a demand for these multifamily housing projects. These commuters probably have children, and the golden retriever, they're not going to live in they're not going to move to Bloomington if they work there. If it means living in a place like Lincoln Lofts, go on Lincoln Lofts, their Google reviews, they've got 2.5-star rating. I mean, this doesn't take rocket science to figure out. Let's just use some common sense. All right, I got to take a quick break. We're going to come back and we're going to talk about the Liberty Justice Center. They're seeking damages and legal reform to prevent future property seizures, what they say is unlawful property seizures in Illinois. I'm going to be right back. You're listening to Conservative Cat. Hey, good morning. You're listening to Conservative Cat Cities 92.9, the news and talk Bloomington normal. Levi, my job is to Levi, I don't know what your name is. My job is to bring the news to people, to bring up these local issues, to point out the flaws in the system, and the flaw in the system here with the Bloomington committee of the whole meeting, we clearly see it. They want the commuters to come live in Bloomington, but they're completely omitting this idea that the reason why people commute in is because it's a cultural staple of Americans, okay, to live outside the city limits 20 minutes and commute into work, okay? They want the single family housing. They're clearly not incentivizing single family housing, the city of Bloomington. It's all about multifamily housing in these huge skyscraper type looking apartments. And like I said, you put a bunch of people together, and pack them together like sardines, they're not going to be very happy. They're going to be unsatisfied with their living conditions. You make it possible for corporate landlords and corporate developers and these big, guys who make all of the money. Okay, you make it possible for them and give the rich. I think it's hilarious. The leftists are pushing this, but it's the same thing that they scream about. They say, tax the rich, Well, now we're providing tax credits for the rich, these big developers who are going to come in and make a ton of money off of these housing projects. So now we're going to cut taxes and not have them pay fees. Your friends, okay, who come in and develop these housing projects, tax the rich. Okay, here is the leftists not taxing the rich, and they want to tax you, though, the commuters who come in. They want to make sure that they get the property taxes. They think that you're going to come move and live in one of these Lincoln Lofts. Okay, hypothetically, if that were to happen, which I don't think it really would, like I said, the American culture thing, 2 kids, golden retriever outside city limits. Even if it were to happen, hypothetically, where you would come and live, okay, they're going to tax you. They're going to tax you out the wazoo. Property taxes. They're going to tax you, sales taxes, motor fuel tax, all of that. Okay, they're going to tax you, and they think that they're going to get the $30 million or whatever it is from the commuters who come in to live here in Bloomington. Okay. They're providing the corporate rich guys tax breaks, but they want your taxes. Do you see where the problem is here? Okay, they're the ones who say tax the rich, we're for the little guy. Clearly you're not. If you were for the little guy, you would be making it easier to do business here, making it cheaper to live here in Bloomington. If you really want to bring people into Bloomington, lower your property taxes, lower the tax burden, okay? Make it actually affordable here, and cut your spending, okay? Bloomington, they just spent $25+ million, I think it was more than that, on the Bloomington Public Library. We're living in a digital age. This absolutely makes no sense. Why would you expand a library? I'd be curious how many patrons they receive, or they tend to on a weekly basis. I doubt that it's that much. You know what I mean? Considering we have the internet and everybody has any kind of book that they want at their fingertips because they've got cell phones, right? I mean, I just don't get the whole nearly $30 million spent on the Bloomington Public Library expansion. I also don't understand the O'Neill Park pool, the aquatic center. It was millions of dollars, tens of millions of dollars. I think it was near 20 million. Maybe I've got to look up these numbers again. But again, a big chunk of money going to renovate the O'Neill Aquatic Center. We live in Illinois, damn it. Like, what? The pool's only open like once a year for a month. I mean, or 2. You might get a 2 months out of it. These amenities, it's just totally ridiculous that you're spending all of this money on crap that we don't need. And why don't you bring down that property tax levy? I'm not saying keep it flat like they always say. Oh, we didn't raise taxes, we're not raising taxes on you. But you are, okay, because the tax assessment is higher. The assessed value of the houses go up each and every single year. So the money you're bringing in, the revenue keeps getting higher and higher. Why don't you cut that property tax levy, like the rate? Why don't you bring the rate down and make it more affordable to live in Bloomington. There's a very easy fix to the affordable housing crisis. Maybe provide housing that people actually want, like single family neighborhoods. Why don't you stop building these multifamily housings in zones, in single family zones, because you're going to wind up causing people to flee their neighborhoods that they love. So this is actually happening, the Essex subdivision, Shelbourne Beach, it's right there in Normal. They are having they're planning another multifamily housing unit to go up right there smack dab in the middle of a single family single family residence zone. You're going to cause those people to move. They're not going to feel like they have their peace, their tranquility, their 2.5 kids golden retriever. You're going to start stacking people up like sardines in a can. People are going to get very unhappy very quickly. And when you start stacking people up in cans, like sardines in can, crime rate goes up. We're already beginning to see this. We saw the crime rate, the increased crime rate. Bloomington put out that report, 1.5%. Increase, 88% increase in robbery, which is absolutely wild to me. There's a very easy fix. Cut the damn taxes. Stop paying for the Bloomington Public Library. Stop paying for downtown streetscapes, fancy sidewalks. We don't need it. Make it actually affordable to live in Bloomington. Tax the rich, tax the rich. I love how Democrats say tax the rich, but here are some Democrats providing tax credits and, reducing fees and cutting fees and talking about cutting fees for big developers. These are guys who make a ton of money off of developing multifamily housing units, and they're like, let's cut taxes for them. Okay, whatever happened, and let's get that commuter money. We really want the average Joe who commutes into work to move to Bloomington so we can tax this guy, collect his tax money. So you say you're for the little guy and that you're all about taxing the rich, but here you are cutting taxes for the rich and taxing the little guy, Democrats. What the hell? I mean, like, what? So you're going to wind up building these multifamily housing units of these big apartment buildings like the Lincoln Lofts. People are going to wind up being really unhappy. Jenna Kearns even acknowledged that the people in Lincoln Lofts, they're not happy. Why? Because they're corporate landlords. They're your landlord. It's not a small town guy who's just, doing business in Bloomington. You're bringing in these big major developers, and they they have a ton of tenants. Maybe they're not able to tend to a lot of their tenants because they've got a ton of them. Okay, so anytime you pack people like sardines in a little can, you're going to get things like crime rates. You're going to get people who are very unhappy. Why? Because human beings aren't naturally supposed to be in condensed areas living on top of each other like that. I'm sorry, but it's just true. I'm not going to lie to you on this program. That's just the fact. The fact that we have all these commuters proves my theory. They want the $30 million in tax money from those commuters. They want to tax you. Here's what Bloomington needs to do. If you want affordable housing, cut the dang property tax levy. Okay, people are going to leave their single family residence because you're taxing them into oblivion. I told you McLean County has the highest property tax, some of the highest property taxes in the state. It's higher than the statewide average when it comes to property taxes. They need to cut the property tax levy rate. And what do I mean by that? Not keeping it flat and saying, oh, we're not raising the taxes. We're not raising the taxes. Cut the taxes. Don't be greedy. Okay, the tax assessed value goes up every single year, which means you're going to get revenue. Just cut it a little bit, and you're going to start to see people come to Bloomington and live there, and it's going to happen organically. And you don't need to provide tax cuts to the rich. These rich developers who are going to build multifamily housing units that people really don't want. Okay, they want the dog, they want the kids, they want to commute into work, and there's nothing that you're going to be able to do really to address that issue. Okay, but maybe making it way more affordable in Bloomington by not paying for things like the Bloomington Public Library, spending tax money on a library when we live in 2025 where we have literally information at our fingertips in our pockets, okay? Not spending money on a pool because we live in Illinois where we can only use it 2 times a year, 2 months out of the entire year, not spending millions and millions of dollars on those 2 little pet projects, okay? So how do we lower the tax burden on Bloomington residents, stop spending money on crap, okay, lower the tax rates, and stop collecting so much from the taxpayers? I mean, this isn't rocket science. It grinds my gears. And they're doing the same thing in Normal. We talked about the Essex subdivision. There's a housing project that's planned. The Normal Planning Commission, they're supposed to have a hearing, I think, on May 8th. And you're going to wind up driving people away from these areas because you're going to start stacking people up like sardines in a can, and people are going to get really unhappy very quickly. You should be focused. If you want more housing, single family housing units. This is what is in demand in America. People like the house where they can keep their kids and raise a family. Okay. You can't put kids in a little loft or like in an apartment. You can't do that. Why don't you focus on the single family, creating little neighborhoods within Bloomington, lowering the taxes? There's just so much more that they could be doing than providing tax cuts for the rich and the wealthy to come here and build these huge buildings that nobody's really going to like to live in anyway. All right, I got to switch gears here. I'm just fired up today. You can find me on YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, and Rumble. Let's get to the Liberty Justice Center. They're suing the Winnebago County Sheriff's Office and the state's attorney, accusing them of unlawfully seizing and holding First Supply LLC. Now, this is like a plumbing company. They've got a delivery truck, and I guess that the sheriff's office and the state's attorney, they've been holding this property for 15 months, despite the company having no involvement in this auto accident that happened in January of 2024. So First Supply, they have a delivery truck, okay? It's stopped at a stoplight, and this alleged drunk driver hops, I guess, the median, drives right into the delivery truck. There's a passenger in the car. The passenger, unfortunately, loses their life. And they seized, the Winnebago County Sheriff's Office seized the company's truck after it was struck by this alleged drunk driver. And they were stopped at a stoplight, and they weren't cited for the accident. The company wasn't. And there's this delivery truck that's all bent up out of shape because the driver, hit the truck. But the Winnebago County Sheriff's Office took the truck and has seized it and has been holding it for 15 months. Okay, so Lauren C. has, the senior counsel at LJC, the Liberty Justice Center, confirmed First Supply was not cited for the accident. Now, there's a process in place here in the state of Illinois. If you're a criminal suspect and your property is taken for evidence, right? If your case gets missed, you can get your property back, and there's a process for that. Now, if your property is seized under the civil asset forfeiture law, there's our specific situation where this comes into play. That law, although this case doesn't apply to it, there's a process for that. Okay, this is a different situation, and there's no legal path for First Supply. There's no process for First Supply to reclaim its vehicle, and this is why LJC, the Liberty Justice Center, they've raised a 14th Amendment and a Fourth Amendment claim here, illegal seizure. And then they also are saying 14th Amendment due process. There is no due process. So, like, you took my property. There's no process for me really in this state to get my property back. Okay, there's processes set up for criminals to get their property back, and there's processes to get your property back if the case against you has been dismissed. But there's no, for a bystander, somebody who, is a part of a crime but is a bystander, there's no way for them to get their property back. Okay, so the Winnebago County Sheriff's Office being sued, C has with First Supply. who's with the Liberty Justice Center, said that First Supply, they actually tried to attempt to go through, because there's no process to get their vehicle back, they actually tried to go through the defense attorney of the alleged drunk driver whose passenger died in the vehicle, okay, at the time of the accident, to see if they could get their vehicle back. Like, hey, defense attorney, I know you're using this vehicle, as evidence, I guess. I don't know. Are you done with it? Can we get it back? They've tried to go everywhere. They've called the sheriff's office, the state's attorney's office, and they've gotten nowhere about getting their delivery truck back. Okay, so First Supply, they didn't learn about the dismissal of the traffic case. Okay, so there was a traffic case opened up after the alleged drunk driver caused this accident and the passenger died. So there was a traffic case opened up. The sheriff's office and the state's attorney, they're obviously dismissed this case, but First Supply didn't know that they dismissed the traffic case. Now they dismissed the traffic case, but then they opened up a criminal case. Okay, so there is a pending criminal case because somebody died, the drunk driver. Okay, so when they reached out to ask for their vehicle, First Supply, both offices refused to release it. Once the traffic case was closed, they were like, okay, now we ought to get our truck back, our delivery truck back. Nope, they refused to release it. Later, the case was refiled as a criminal felony case due to the passenger's death in the crash, and the charges against the driver are still pending. The trial hasn't even begun yet. The court appearance isn't scheduled until May, and like I said, this is a court appearance, not the start of trial. So First Supply, they are waiting for their truck. So they said, enough's enough. We're going to take matters into our own hands. We're going to sue. Okay, so they're suing. And, this is a prolonged seizure, completely unreasonable, given the circumstances. I mean, this is that they were a bystander. Okay. They have 15 months here having this vehicle. And it wasn't even the vehicle really involved in the crash. It wasn't the vehicle that the drunk driver was in, nothing. I mean, it just was a bystanding vehicle and it was crashed into. C has pointed out that the investigators have already taken their photographs. They completed actually an accident recreation. So they recreated the accident. She said that any potential biological evidence that was, on the car or in the car, that has long since been deteriorated. It's been 15 months at this point. She says, quote, I can't speculate if this is just bureaucratic negligence on behalf of the state's attorney and the sheriff's office. It could be simply that they let First Supply fall through the cracks here, and they didn't even realize maybe the truck was in their possession. Who knows? But they're seeking damages because 15 months the truck has been sitting there in an open air impound lot. It's probably suffered exposure to the elements, possible rodent infestation. You're dealing with degradation of the vehicle, not starting the vehicle. It's going to be, and then not to mention the damages of them having to get as a business, they had to go get another vehicle to make up for the loss of this vehicle. So they're renting a different vehicle and they're paying to rent that vehicle. So when the government takes your personal property, they've got to have a warrant or extingent circumstances to take that vehicle. In this case, there were no such circumstances. They weren't a fleeing suspect. They were just an innocent bystander, and the authorities could have easily obtained a warrant within a short period of time if they needed. During that time, to obtain a warrant to get the truck, First Supply would have put their vehicle away in a covered garage and waited for their insurance adjuster to come out and fix the vehicle, which would have taken a couple of weeks probably. And that would have been plenty of time for the officials to get a warrant to get the truck if they truly needed it for evidence. So at the end of the day, this isn't just about First Supply. This is about everybody in Illinois. If it's not First Supply, it's going to be a mom and pop company who can't afford to lease another vehicle. Or it's going to be a soccer mom with a van full of kids, and she needs that van to take her kids to school, So they're seeking monetary damages for the company. And like Sia said, this is not just about First Supply. This is for the people of Illinois so that there can be a process created. So right now, the big problem is that this is bystander. There is no process for a bystander to obtain their seized property back. And another big problem with this is that there's no warrant. I've never heard of something like that where they don't get a warrant and they take your property and they just say that they can take your property, which is just outrageous to me. But this could happen to anybody. I do have to take a quick break. You're listening to Conservative Cat Cities 92.9. I got a few more things that I want to hit. The USDA, should it come to Illinois? Should it be ripped out of Washington, D.C., the swamp, and thrown right into the heart of farm country, Illinois? A lawmaker thinks so. Come back to find out which lawmaker wants to move the USDA to central Illinois next. Hey, go ahead, smash that like button, share this out with your friends. And hey, I appreciate it. Yeah, look at my shirt. That's awesome. Isn't that awesome? Donald Trump pumping his fist in the air. I appreciate the comment. Here we go. They seem turning to crap because of that. They seem to be doing that all over the nation now. So you're probably talking about the multifamily housing. Yes. What this is, a lot of these big developers, they're backed by people like George Soros. Okay. Think BlackRock. They're also backed by BlackRock. And a lot of major players, particularly Democrat major players and globalists. Okay. So this is all part of the 15-minute city smart cities plan. Okay, they won't tell you that, but it is. It's all a plan to create these huge urban areas where people will have nothing, own nothing, and be happy. Okay, so you're not going to own your own house. You're going to pay rent to me your entire life, the corporate landlord, and I'm going to make all of the money. And you peasant, you're going to stay in your shoebox of an apartment, and you're never going to have kids. You're never going to have your dog. You're never going to own a dog. And you're going to have nothing, but you're going to be happy because I'm going to take care of everything for you. But we've seen this already at a micro level here. Look at Lincoln Lofts. The tenants are very unhappy. Okay. You have nothing. You're not owning property. You're not owning a dog. You don't have kids. You have nothing. Okay. You have your shoebox apartment. That's it. Okay. And unfortunately, those people realize pretty quickly that the people at the tippity top, who they're paying rent to, they don't care about their happiness, and they won't ensure that their living conditions are up to standard. So we see this all of the time because, and at the end of the day, these landlords, these corporate landlords, maybe it's malicious, but maybe it's just simply the fact that they have 200 plus tenants in this unit and they can't get to everybody's needs. So you have a busted window, or you have an air conditioner that won't work, and you're sweating and you're hot and it's uncomfortable in your apartment, and you've called the landlord several times. Well, he's dealing with not 199 other tenants. Okay, so naturally you're going to be unhappy in this place. Just because the corporate landlord isn't going to be able to prioritize you as a human being. And really, it's dehumanizing these multifamily units. They dehumanize you. They have to, because it's inhumane, really, to be stacking people up on, and they say it's going to be affordable housing. Let me just look at I don't know how much. Yeah, I mean, here it is. Lincoln Lofts. They say affordable housing. How affordable does this sound to you? $1,000 is. Oh wait, hold on. Let me look here at the rent. I'm trying to look at the rent here. I think it's calculated on your income. It's government housing. But I'm trying to look for the average income. Okay, so average income or average price range, and I think it's calculated on your income. I don't know a ton about Lincoln Lofts, but it says somewhere anywhere between $939 and $1,150. At least that's according to apartments.com with the Lincoln Lofts. You know, they've got that range in there, and like, yeah, sure, affordable, but is it? You're going to be wasting, essentially, you're not building any kind of equity, you're not getting any kind of ownership over this unit. Okay, you're paying essentially $1,000 a month to the corporate landlord guy, to the rich guy, and he's just getting more rich. Okay, so I'm in Orlando, Florida. There's too many swimming pools. Yeah, we were talking about Illinois, and I don't understand governments who spend money on public pools in Illinois. That makes no sense, and not to mention millions. Okay, so I could actually look this up for you. O'Neill Aquatic Center, Bloomington cost. They just expansion cost. It was in the millions. Yeah, $14 million. The pool and park project, that was $14 million that they just spent on that. And it's just like, dude, we live in Illinois. You can't even probably use it like 10 months out of the year. Wow, good morning. Hey, find me on YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, and Rumble. Before we took the break, I was telling you a little bit about moving the USDA. That's the Agriculture Department, the United States Department of Agriculture. They want to move it to Illinois, and that is State Representative Reagan Deering. She's a Republican. She introduced a resolution urging President Donald Trump and Congress to begin the process of relocating the USDA from Washington, D.C. to central Illinois. Deering emphasized that crops don't grow in the swamp, they grow in the fertile plains of central Illinois. She added that it's time that the government relocate the USDA to a place where people are focused on planting crops and not pushing paper. Yes. And this is why the Farm Bill, this has been an issue for multiple years now. The Farm Bill has gotten away from providing help to farmers. Rather, it is focused on welfare programs like SNAP benefits. Okay, so a lot of the tax money is going to people who eat the food, not the people who produce the bill or the food. And I mean, the Farm Bill should be going towards, you know, the people who produce the food, not the people who eat the food, in my opinion. But this is what happens when you remove the agency away from the people who are actually here planting the crops. They're pushing paper. They don't quite understand how farming works, and naturally, you know, things like the Farm Bill are going to get messied up or screwed up, and they're going to do more in the welfare programs than they do for the farmers, because they don't understand how hard it is to farm the people in the swamp, Washington, D.C. Okay, so the Department of Agriculture, they, you know, dish out all of this money, all this taxpayer money to SNAP benefactors. So here's what Reagan Deering said. She said, Bloomington and Decatur, they're home for major agribusiness giants like Archer Daniels Midland, ADM, Growmark. There's also nearby universities like Illinois State University, U of I. These are hubs for agricultural innovation. And some of the best producers of the country are right here in Illinois. It would make sense for the USDA to come here. According to Deering, this resolution is actually mirroring the strategic withdrawal of agencies for meaningful placement. So if you take the acronym here, that's SWAMP Act. This was introduced in Congress, and it's a bipartisan effort to move agencies out of Washington, D.C. and into the heartland where these agencies are closest and impact the most people, okay? So the elites in Washington, D.C. have no idea what it's like to farm, and moving the agency that deals with farming, agriculture, just makes sense to move it right here in Illinois. HR 177, according to Darin, is a way to align Illinois with federal efforts with the Swamp Act. Okay, so this is a House resolution. This is an Illinois resolution. She said relocating the USDA to central Illinois would cut costs for taxpayers as well. So, now that you have a skilled workforce who is going to be, so you move the USDA to Illinois, you're no longer going to get the Washington, D.C. elitists, the pencil pushers. You're going to wind up with a more skilled workforce. There's also lower housing costs. There's a great quality of life in Illinois, arguably, probably better than Washington, D.C. But you're going to get people who are skilled, and you won't have to hire as many people likely because you have a skilled workforce, and you could probably get away with cutting some of these jobs and giving them to a skilled workforce who know how to do things when it comes to agriculture. These Washington, D.C. elitists don't know a dang thing about farming, I'm sure. So Darin addressed Republicans' concerns over the growing focus on welfare programs in the Farm Bill. So the Farm Bill has been a challenge for multiple years, says Darin. The agricultural industry and the subsidies it seeks are closely tied with what the other side wants, the Democrats, in terms of welfare programs. Okay, the ag industry is listening to the Democrats. Why? Because the ag department is full of Democrats and that they are all in Washington, D.C. and don't know a dang thing about farming. So bringing the Department of Agriculture to central Illinois would allow the decision makers to focus more intensely on the farmers who drive the economy, and quite literally feed the world. So let's focus the agency on ag, right? So she suggested that moving the USDA to Illinois from Washington, D.C. could lead to a reduction in workforce because there is a skilled workforce in Illinois. You might be able to get by with less workers in that they're skilled and they know what they're doing. Okay, so this is something, quote, that the president and the Department of Government Efficiency have been working towards streamlining our agencies, decreasing the bloat. Many of my constituents here in Illinois, this is what Regan Darin says, are all for that. So I got to take a quick break, but you're listening to Conservative Cat. We're going to get to Darin LaHood and his office in Uptown Normal and how it was marched on by protesters who were upset about cuts to Medicaid. And I'm using air quotes here, cuts to Medicaid. Medicaid isn't getting cut. What they're doing is they're eliminating waste and fraud, but the Democrats are upset about that? Question mark. I'll be right back. You're listening to Conservative Cat. Hey, go ahead, smash that like button, share this out with your friends. We're going to come right back. We're going to talk about Medicaid and how it's not getting cut. Actually, there's just going to be an elimination of waste and fraud. Crystal Abel, a McLean County board member and Normal Township supervisor. Oh gosh, I just can't even believe that's even possible. Like, you're serving in a low level of government and a high level of government. Tiffany Henyard, she also did this. She called herself super mayor, and we saw what happened there. She actually has a current FBI investigation into her, looking into fraud and corruption and things like that. But anyway, that says she went to social media, Crystal, and she expressed gratitude for the turnout of disability advocates, home workers, labor groups, seniors, and retirees who gathered to demand no cuts to Medicaid. We're going to get to this. There are a few clips I want to play of Donald Trump repeatedly saying, we are not cutting Medicaid, Social Security, Medicare. We're not cutting any of it. I don't know how many. He has said it over and over and over again. And I'm going to prove it to you because I'm going to play the clips back to back to back. Elon Musk has never said that they're going to cut Medicaid. What they are doing is they're going after the fraud and the waste within these programs. So that way the benefactors, the true benefactors, not these fraudsters who take advantage of the program, they're going to eliminate the fraud and the abuse. And they're going to make sure that the benefactors are getting the amount that they need and protect the most vulnerable people who are supposed to be on Medicaid. So I'm going to be right back. You're listening to Conservative Cat Cities 92.9. Hey, good morning. You're listening to Conservative Cat City's 92.9, the news and talk Bloomington Normal. At the top of the hour, we are going to get into it. LaHood's office was marched on by advocates, disability advocates, labor groups, and they were protesting cuts to Medicaid. Well, I don't know what the hell they're protesting because there aren't any cuts being made to Medicaid. They're just eliminating the waste and fraud and abuses within the program. We're going to get to that because Crystal Label, McLean County board member and Normal Township supervisor, yes, she serves in two forms of government, a lower form and a higher form of government, on social media expressed gratitude for the turnout of disability advocates, home workers, home care workers, labor groups, and seniors and retirees who gathered together and demanded no cuts to Medicaid. We're going to get to her social media post. We're also going to get to Darin LaHood's response. There's photos, of course, circulating on social media with LaHood's face on a milk carton and posters reading, "Where's LaHood?" LaHood was on schedule. He was going up to the northern part of his district. It's 21, I think it's like 21 counties is how big his district is. And he had a schedule and he was going around and he was meeting with other constituents. Interestingly enough, these people didn't get on his schedule to talk with him about the cuts to Medicaid. And I'm using air quotes here, cuts. So we're going to get to that, but win a Caribbean cruise with Cities 92.9. Check out our cruise stops. The Deep End Tap in Bloomington is our next cruise stop, May 5th from 5 to 7. We're going to be drawing finalists to win a prize pack and qualify for a spot at our grand prize giveaway on June 26th at the Smash Out Tavern in Bloomington. You got to be 21 years of age to enter to win a cruise. This is the best gift or the best prize we've ever given away. I'll be back. Welcome to the Red Kingdom. Hey, you're listening to Conservative Cat Cities 92.9, the news talk Bloomington Normal. You can always find me on YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, and Rumble. Coming up, you won't want to miss it. Jasmine Crockett reduced to tears, literal tears, over how mean Donald Trump is being to the illegal immigrants. And then next, we're going to get to David Hogg. He diagnoses the real problem with America. And the real problem with America is that we have too much democracy. David Hogg, we're going to see him a lot over the next 4 years. He's the Democrat Party leader. And then we're also going to get to Carmelo Anthony. This is a really strange story. I want to get to the truth here about the black and white relations here in America. This story has really taken a turn for the worse. Carmelo Anthony, the alleged stabber of the Metcalf boy, they're both 17, I think, and this was at like a track meet underneath the tent. I brought you this story last week, but there's been some developments. There was a press conference held by the family, and of course, they're playing the we're a struggling black family card. And I'm just going to be honest with you. They're not struggling in any kind of way. They've got a near $1 million house, okay, multiple vehicles. They're not struggling in any kind of way. And really, at the end of the day, what's probably going to be proven in court is that his son, the boy Carmelo, allegedly at this point stabbed in cold blood. I mean, like, and murdered. The boy died in his twin brother's arms. We're gonna find out, obviously, but this is really about black and white relations in America. So we're going to get to that story here in just a couple of minutes, but I want to start with Crystal Label in the McLean County. She's a McLean County board member, Normal Township supervisor. Dozens of people, of course, gathered in March to Congressman Darin LaHood's office in Uptown Normal. If you drove by, you might have seen them. They had, makeshift poster boards with Darin LaHood's face plastered all over him. Where's Darin LaHood? Where's Darin LaHood? He's on his schedule. You guys didn't even try to get on his schedule to talk about these cuts to Medicaid, but really they're not cuts, okay? The congressman described the Medicaid cuts as Congress's responsibility to eliminate waste, fraud, and abuse in federal spending. Okay, so Crystal Label on social media expressed gratitude for the turnout of disability advocates, home care workers, labor groups, senior and retirees who gathered and demanded that there be no cuts made to Medicaid. She said, quote, "We're gathered with disability advocates, Adapt Chicago, Life Center for Independent Living, and Bloomington Normal community members who are advocating for no cuts to Medicaid. We're gathering in the plaza right now outside the Amtrak station." She was saying this in a live stream video, encouraging followers to join the protest soon. "We will be heading over to Representative LaHood's office, right diagonal from us, where the entire staff has exited the building and left for the day." Okay, so this is what Crystal Label said on social media. Abel said, "When protesters started to arrive, that's when LaHood's staff closed up and left." And she said, quote, "We will not be meeting with Congressman LaHood or anybody from his staff as we suspected, but we will still be making our voices heard. So please come down to Uptown Normal, join our fellow community members and disability rights organizations and fight for no cuts to Medicaid and no tax breaks for the billionaires." Okay. So she said this on a live stream video. LaHood's office confirmed that the advocates had made no attempts to schedule a meeting to talk about the cuts. He has 21 counties in his district. He was in the northern part of his district that day. That's why he packed up and left and his staff left. They hosted an open house for prospective students and parents who were interested in the nation's service academies. That's where he was at. He was touring local businesses and he hosted this open house that he had to get to in the northern part of the district. It's a large district, okay? And like, if you were serious, here's the thing. They just want to create chaos to create chaos. If you were serious about no cuts to Medicaid, you would have gotten on the congressman's schedule so that way you could have a representative. Being the executive director, Crystal, you could have easily, gotten onto his schedule and talked about the no cuts to Medicaid and tried to advocate to the congressman your grievances here about the cuts to Medicaid. But this isn't even cuts to Medicaid, okay? What we're talking about here is eliminating fraud and waste within the program, okay? So LaHood, he said, about leaving the office, he said, I'm committed to focusing on issues that matter to my constituents. I will continue to provide high quality constituent services, support local businesses, and meet with constituents across the 16th congressional district and represent their interest in Washington, D.C. They didn't even really try to meet with them because there were no attempts. They confirmed, at least the LaHood's office said, that there were no attempts to schedule a meeting. There was no scheduled meeting with these advocates. So they went there with milk cartons with LaHood's face on it and poster boards reading, "Where's LaHood?" He's going around his district and following his schedule because he's a congressman. That's where he's at. So, like I said, she's the executive director, Crystal Label, of the Illinois Alliance for Retired Americans. You would think, being that she is the executive director of some sort of retirement organization or retirement or senior organization, and this is a nonprofit, you would think that she'd try to get on the LaHood's calendar schedule. This is how life goes, right? In order to talk with somebody, you have to kind of schedule out time to talk with them rather than just showing up and being loud and chaotic for no reason. If you actually cared about the issue, you would actually care about the issue. Am I right? So the executive director of Illinois Alliance for Retired Americans, Crystal Abel, she does that. She does the normal township thing. She's pulled in a lot of different directions. It raises the question, is she actually providing constituent services? I don't know. How great is she as a representative, being that she has to meet with McLean County constituents on top of the normal township constituency? Then she also has to run this nonprofit organization. Clearly, something's going to fall through the cracks, and it appears that it is, because according to the 2023 tax filings, Illinois Alliance for Retired Americans, this is a nonprofit organization, which this is kind of common for nonprofit organizations, but it's indicative of what is going on, with this lack of success and excellence. Okay. So spent $131,000, according to tax filings 2023, the organization, they spent $131,000, and then they only generated $65,677. So this tells me that it's failing. Okay. In the private sector, this would be a failing business. Okay. You would be in the hole by a whole lot. Okay. You're only generating $65,000, then you're spending $130,000. The math isn't mathing here. And that is the crux of the issue here. So her own organization is in the red, as you would say, if this were, a business, an actual business. Nonprofit organizations do this kind of stuff all the time, where they're not actually generating, many, like, how are you, like, you're going into debt, and like, I just don't understand this at all. And that's why they are screaming about Medicaid, because they don't understand the true issue here that they're trying to address. Is there is an importance of addressing the nation's $36 trillion debt. Okay, we have 36 trillion, trillion with the T, dollar debt. Democrats don't get debt. They don't see it as a bad thing, and I don't understand that at all. Debt is a terrible thing. You don't want to be in debt. And clearly she doesn't care, right? Look at her Illinois Alliance Retired for Americans organization. Debt, okay? They only generated $65,000, and then they spent $131,000. The math isn't mathing here. And LaHood, in his statement, it's in response to this protest, he said, there is an importance. He emphasized that it is very important that we address the $36 trillion in debt. So how are we going to do that? LaHood argued that to ensure long-term sustainability of the program, Medicaid, spending must be prioritized and focused on delivering high-quality care to those who need it most. We can't be spending to people who don't providing Medicaid to people who don't exist. Okay, that's happening. Or Social Security to people who don't exist. We can't be fraudulently, like spending federal spending and spending this money on people who aren't even collecting the benefits. We're just throwing money into an empty account and nobody's actually collecting the benefits. So we've got to be smart. We've got to address this $36 trillion debt. Here's what LaHood said, quote, in Congress, we are working to address the fraud, the waste, and the abuse in the program, increase transparency, support rural and underserved communities, and prioritize care for the nation's most vulnerable. The Trump administration has said that they are not cutting Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid benefits for people who actually need them. Okay. What they are doing is they are eliminating waste and fraud within the program. That is much different than cutting this program entirely for people who are on it, who need. So if you are on Medicaid, if you collect Medicaid or Social Security, if you have these benefits, and you are of the proper age to receive the benefits like Social Security, and if there's no problem, like, you are not going to see a problem. In fact, I bet, a few years down the road, you're probably going to see more benefits, being that they cut all this waste and fraud. The cutting, they're going to be able to provide a little bit of that back to the true benefactors, the people who are supposed to be benefiting from these programs. All right, now let's take a listen to Donald Trump, because he said it over and over and over again. Here's one time.
Look, Social Security won't be touched, other than if there's fraud or something. We're going to find it's going to be strengthened, but won't be touched. Medicare, Medicaid, none of that stuff is going to be touched.
Nothing.
You don't have to. Now, if there are illegal migrants in the system, we're going to get them out of the system and all of that fraud. But it's not going to be touched. Look.
It's not going to be touched. It's not going to be touched. Okay, so he said it over and over and over again. Here's another time Donald Trump said it. Here we go. I've got to prove.
Social Security will not be touched. It'll only be strengthened. We have illegal immigrants on Social Security, and we're going to find out who they are and take them out. We have illegal immigrants in other Medicare. We found a lot of bad people, a lot of people that shouldn't be on, that were put on through California. A lot of them come out of California. We're not going to stand for that. So we're going to strengthen our Social Security, et cetera. We're not going to touch it other than to make it stronger. But we have people that shouldn't be on, and those people we have to weed out. Most of them, or many of them so far, have been illegal immigrants. They shouldn't even be in the country.
Okay, so again, he's not cutting Medicaid. He's making it stronger. He's strengthening it for people who are actually supposed to be on it. One more time, just for good measure, just to prove that I ain't lying, President Donald Trump saying he's not cutting Medicaid.
The spending bill that passed last night aims to cut $2 trillion.
Right.
Can you guarantee that Medicare, Medicaid, Social Security will not be touched?
Yeah, I mean, I have said it so many times, you shouldn't be asking me that question. Okay, this will not be read my lips. It won't be read my lips anymore. We're not going to touch it. Now, we are going to look for fraud. I'm sure you're okay with that, like people that shouldn't be on, people that are illegal aliens and others, criminals in many cases. And that's with Social Security. We have a lot of people. You see that immediately when you see people that are 200 years old that are being sent checks for Social Security. Some of them are actually being sent checks. So we're tracing that down, and I have a feeling that Pam is going to do a very good job with that. But you have a lot of fraud. But no, we're not doing anything on this.
No, I'm not cutting it. I'm not cutting it. So I really don't understand what they were protesting in Uptown Normal that day, because there are no cuts to Medicaid. And surely you're not saying that you are what kind of person doesn't want to support eliminating waste, fraud, and abuse in government? Because that's what you're protesting, because that's what they're doing. They're not cutting it for people who are supposed to be on the program. And what you're really doing is you're advocating for waste, fraud, and abuse in government spending. And it ultimately costs taxpayers more, and it ultimately costs vulnerable communities more, these vulnerable communities to not receive the proper benefits in which they're entitled to. So Elon Musk also did not say that they were going to cut the program. The fake news has been lying about that. The press has been lying about that. Elon Musk, his direct quote is, quote, the waste and fraud in entitlement spending, which is most of the federal spending is in entitlements. So like that's a big one to eliminate, the waste and fraud within entitlement spending. That's what Elon Musk says here, and he said he estimated it to be about $500 billion, maybe $600 to $700 billion a year. Let's take a listen to Elon Musk and what he actually said. He was on with Fox Business Report Kudlow, or Fox Business Kudlow. Let's take a listen. Here we go.
I mean, the way it's important in entitlement spending, which is which is most of the federal spending is entitlements. So that's like the big one to eliminate. Is that's the sort of $500 billion, maybe $700 billion a year. I mean, the way it's important.
Okay, so he's exactly right. Fact, the U.S. Government Accountability Office estimates that taxpayers lose as much as $521 billion annually to fraud, and most of that is within entitlement programs such as Medicaid, Medicare. Fact, over the past 2 decades, the federal government, the U.S. Government Accountability Office, has estimated $2.7 trillion in improper payments, the majority of which come in the form of payments to deceased individuals or those who are no longer eligible for government programs. Okay, so Medicaid, in order to receive Medicaid, you've got to be within a certain income threshold. People are getting new jobs. They get a new job. They're making, hundreds of thousands of dollars a year, but yet they're still collecting like Medicaid, or they're still on Medicaid. And that happens all the time. And it's estimated that $2.7 trillion goes to improper payments, okay, over the past two decades, over the last 20 years. So Social Security Administration has estimated $72 billion in improper payments between 2015 and 2022. Fact, the Center for Medicare and Medicaid Services estimated about $140 billion in improper payments were made in 2024 alone. So improper payments for Medicaid and Medicare services in 2024 alone, $140 billion. So improper payments, this is payments to people who are deceased, payments to people who are no longer eligible to receive benefits from these programs. What kind of person, and I'm going to say it again, what kind of person doesn't support eliminating waste, fraud, and abuse in government spending that ultimately winds up costing taxpayers more? What kind of person is, I'll tell you what kind of people, the people gathered in Uptown Normal and marching on Governor, or on Congressman LaHood's office. All right, I got to take a quick break. You're listening to Conservative Cat Cities 92.9. Hey, go ahead, smash that like button, share this out with your friends. I so do appreciate it. You're completely wrong about me, man. I don't understand what you mean. I mean, I do have a husband, and we have joint income, and we're married. I don't understand why you care so much about my income and my finances. Most likely, you're living in mommy's basement. That's why you care so much about my income in my life. And you are dissatisfied with your own life, so you feel like you need to bully me. So I feel bad for you. I do, my friend, and I'm praying for you, and I hope that your life is abundant and that you live the abundant life. So yeah, she's a clown. Yeah, I've thousands of people who listen to the show. You guys are welcome to subscribe. I do this, and I put a lot of work into it. I research, I do original reporting. We've done so many stories that have actually resulted in real outcomes. For example, in Hayworth, we exposed a teacher who was putting a pornographic film amongst her reading assignments. It's called Money Shot. It's a Netflix documentary called Money Shot, and all you really need to know is the definition of money shot, which I'm not going to discuss here on the program. Just Google the term money shot, and she was showing this to 12-year-olds, right? And allowing 12-year-olds to use this as a reading assignment. Through original reporting, through interviews, through digging, through finding things on the classroom assignment page, taking time, sitting down, writing it, sharing the photographs, building relationships with the parents out there in Hayworth, we were able to expose what was actually going on in the classroom, and she got fired as a result. So as of our story, We were the first ones to publish it, and she got fired as a result. And really, ultimately, at the end of the day, that was a good thing, because that means that she's never going to be, at least exposing the Hayworth children to the pornographic material anymore, and requiring it as a reading, or using it as a reading assignment, or encouraging students to read it as part of a reading assignment. Reading Mondays, I'll never forget that story. There's been several stories like that. We've done some real good here in the community. Original reporting that we've done, we've exposed quite a lot with the normal or with the normal government officials, ballot questions, trying to advocate for the democratic process, where you put a question on the ballot: shall the town be divided up into districts rather than an at-large government? We did most of the reporting on that story, original reporting, where you had citizens of Normal who were trying to get this question on the ballot. They were shut down because the town of Normal said, hey, we're not a village. We're not required by state statute to have districts. We want to remain an at-large government. At-large governments are never really great, because that means that your councilman doesn't have to live in your community. So Normal, it's a pretty big area. You can choose to live in uptown Normal or in the nice parts of Normal, and you can, be removed from your district and from your constituency. And that's why districts exist. So that way the councilman has to live in the district in which they are representing. And they are accountable and are held accountable because they also live there too. It's by design, the district and the ward systems, to make sure that your councilman is dealing with the problems that you're dealing with on a day-to-day basis. If there's a street lamp out, that affects him and his kids as well. If there's a pothole on his street, that affects him and his kids and his family as well. But they can choose right now, the at-large, they can choose to live in, maybe the nicer parts of Normal, and they don't live where you are residing, and they don't feel accountability. So that's why they wanted to get that district question on the ballot. They were shut down, of course, by town officials. And then they turned around. They said, oh, because we're an incorporated town, we can't be divvied up into districts. Okay, well then the Normal citizens for a better Normal, they organized and they said, okay, we're going to put some representatives on the ballot, because if you're an incorporated town, state statute says that you have to have a town clerk, assessor, and supervisor all be elected positions if you are in fact, and we have a process in place to protect the constituency. To protect the represented. Okay, there has to be proper representation in a democracy, or in a democratic process, in a constitutional republic. There has to be proper representation, and in an incorporated town, those should have been elected. So they ran people to get on the ballot, petitions, and they got those petitions signed. They knocked those people off the ballot. It all went to court, and ultimately the Normal citizens got screwed out of proper representation, thanks to Sharon Chung, who changed the law, the state statute, to carve out Normal from having to work within the parameters of representation, proper representation. So we've done a lot of work here, and I think that we'd make a real difference. And I'd like to think that a lot of our listeners are appreciative. And Levi, I'm sorry, man, that you're not. But you're welcome to go elsewhere for your content. Hey, good morning. You're listening to Conservative Cat Cities 92.9, the news and talk of Bloomington Normal. Head on over to cities99.com and nominate a farmer today. I love the smell of the dirt and the springtime. The fields are getting tilled up. And now is the time to nominate a farmer for Feed the Farmers. We do this every single year, thanks to our friends at Corn Pal Energy, good guys at Barker Chevy, Compier Financial, Lincoln Precision. We're feeding the farmers again this year. Nominate your farmer. And if we select them, we're going to drive out freaky fast Jimmy John sandwiches to them while they're working out in their fields. So nominate a farmer today at cities929.com. While you're there, you can steal your deal from our Steals and Deals website. Click on the Steals and Deals logo. There's Paran Indian Restaurant gift certificates, $20 right now, going for just $10. You're going to want to steal that deal. Now, before I took the break, I was telling you a little bit about all the different facts. Okay, fact, the U.S. Government Accountability Office, they estimated that taxpayers lose as much as $521 billion annually to fraud. And most of that is within these entitlement programs such as Medicare and Medicaid. Okay, so fact, over the last 20 years, the federal government, the Office of Accountability, they have made an estimated $2.7 trillion, or well, the federal government has found that, and they estimate that the federal government has spent $2.7 trillion in improper payments. So what is improper payments? Improper payments is payments to people who are deceased individuals who cannot really reap the benefits of these payments, or they're no longer eligible for government programs. So you have people making hundreds of thousands of dollars. They're not eligible for Medicaid, but they're collecting Medicaid benefits, okay? And they're reaping the benefits of Medicaid. That's wrong, okay? $2.7 trillion in improper payments. The Social Security Administration, they made an estimated $72 billion in improper payments just between 2015 and 2022. And the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services estimated it made $140 billion in improper payments in 2024 alone. $140 billion in improper payments in Medicaid alone. So, like I said, these people are screaming at the sky. And at the crux of the issue here, Democrats don't get debt. They don't see it as a problem. They don't see, waste, fraud. They don't see this as a problem. Crystal Label, the executive director of Illinois Alliance for Retired Americans, you'd look at their tax filings. It's a nonprofit organization. They spent $130,000, over $130,000, but they only generated like $65,000 in revenue. So you do the math here. They're in the hole. Okay. So of course, they're not going to understand the gravity of debt and understand that it's important to address that debt. And it's important that we don't waste money in federal spending on improper payments, like the $140 billion in improper payments in 2024. The Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services estimated that they made $140 billion in improper payments in just 2024. That's 1 year. So what kind of person doesn't want to eliminate waste and fraud and abuse in the government that ultimately costs you more as a taxpayer? It's the people who are benefiting from that fraud, from that waste, and from that abuse. They don't want to get rid of the waste, fraud, and abuse. The kind of person who doesn't want to get rid of it, or they're benefiting from the waste, fraud, and abuse, and they're doing it at the expense of you, the little guy who pays more and more and more in taxes. All right, the second kid you had to put off, having your second child, the decision at the grocery line, no, I can't get this steak. I gotta, put it back. I've got to put my groceries back because I can't afford it. The reason why is because you're taxed into oblivion, okay? And it's because you're supporting the people who are frauding the system and abusing the system. So Jasmine Crockett, let's get to her. She was reduced to literal tears. This is kind of hilarious. Because of how mean Donald Trump is when it comes to illegal aliens. So we're going to get to that. We're also going to get to David Hogg. He diagnoses the real problem in America, and I guess it's because we have too much democracy in America, and he's going to be the Democratic Party leader, or he is the Democrat Party leader, and he's going to be around for the next 4 years. And I don't know if he wants to go out and say this part out loud. He says that there's too much democracy in America. So we're going to get to that, plus Carmelo Anthony and the story with the Metcalf boy and the stabbing. We're going to get to that story as well. So let's get to this. The left, went after Donald Trump to such an extreme extent that they tried to put him in prison. Let's not forget that, okay? They went after Donald Trump so hard to a point where they tried to imprison him. Okay. And we can't forget that. But it backfired, clearly, because now he's president. And to say it, the very least, Crockett still thought it's a good idea to compare Donald Trump with Kilmar Abrego Garcia, the El Salvador national, whom the White House believes is an MS-13 gang member. So she compared Donald Trump to this which is going to backfire on her because they want Kilmar to come back. I'm so confused by all of it. Let's take a listen here to Jasmine Crockett. It was actually reduced to tears on MSNBC. Here we go.
But here's the reality. As far as I'm concerned, he's a lot less criminal than the person that's sitting in the White House. Because last time I checked, he doesn't have any criminal convictions. I don't even think he has any outstanding cases versus the guy that still had cases pending when he was sworn in on January 20th and also has 34 felony convictions. So listen, I don't want to hear anything from the Republican Party about how they're trying to keep us safe when their fearless leader is actually the biggest criminal thus far that we have seen, because I haven't seen anybody with a rap sheet that looks like the president's.
So I want to exercise a point of personal privilege right now. I'm going to play a really quick clip for you, Congresswoman, and ask you a question on the other side. Take a watch and listen. My next guest joining me now is Texas State Representative Jasmine Crockett. Representative, so happy to have you here. I know you had a busy day yesterday. Well, Texas State Representative Jasmine Crockett, thank you for being here and thanks for all of your advocacy. We appreciate it. Okay, that was you and I 3 years ago. That was your first time on the Katie Fang Show. This is the second to the last episode of the show. Congresswoman, I wanted to thank you for always getting up and early and delivering it. But I also want to say thank you for your continuing support for democracy. It's definitely something that you have made your brand, and it's the integrity that you're bringing. And I'm grateful for you always.
She's crying.
We'll miss you.
Oh.
You can't have me crying at the beginning of a show, Jasmine. Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett, you haven't seen the last of me. Thank you for being here and getting us started today.
These people aren't serious. They're not serious, folks. I just, what was that? That was wild. This video proves why Katie Fang has no longer has a show. People don't want to see that. Like, she's literally butt kissing Jasmine Crockett. And then earlier you heard her compare Donald Trump's rap sheet to Kilmar Garcia, the El Salvador national, whom we all know is an MS-13 gang member. Like, they're actually trying to say Donald Trump is like an MS-13 gang member and he shouldn't be going after illegal immigrants and MS-13 gang members because he's got quite the rap sheet himself. Like, this is so ridiculous. The Democrat Party has proved that they're fighting for foreign nationals. They're not fighting for the American people. And the fact that Crockett claims that Trump makes America less safe by deporting these types of people is proof that they live in la la land. Okay, the left lives in la 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 land. They have no idea what the American people actually care about, which is there was record open border, total record border crossings under the Biden administration, and the American people are not favorable of that. The Democrat Party has dedicated was one that dedicated much of 2020 election to removing police protection from everyday Americans. Okay, they are the ones who want to throw this country into chaos, disorder. The 2020 election, they were wanting to remove police protection, defund the police for everyday Americans who rely on police departments to protect them. They're also one of the ones who created the worst border crisis in American history. And they're the ones currently fighting back to bring back Kilmar Garcia, who is an alleged gang. The White House says he is a gang member, that courts have decided and convicted him as an MS-13 gang member. And it can't be summed up better than that, to be honest with you, is they're the ones who defund police. They're the ones who created an open border crisis. And now they're the ones fighting to bring back an MS-13 gang member to the United States. According to Fox News, the comment after Crockett's interview with MSNBC host Katie Fang on Saturday, where Democrat lawmaker said Kilmar Garcia, an illegal immigrant who was recently deported, was a lot less criminal than Donald Trump. actually, no, seriously, Jasmine Crockett actually said that Donald Trump was more criminal than Kilmar Garcia, who has MS-13 gang tattoos all over his hands. Like, come on. So here's what she said, direct quote from Crockett. She says, I mean, we know that they admitted that they were wrong. Now they're trying to double back and say, well, he's a terrible person and he's all this kind of stuff. But here's the reality, as far as I'm concerned, he's a lot less criminal than the person we have sitting in the White House. Because the last time I checked, he doesn't have any criminal convictions. Absolutely ridiculous. It's unclear when it became common practice to deport foreign nationals back to their home country and into the United States. But this is when did this become a thing where we deport foreign people who are breaking the for our federal immigration laws? They've broken the federal immigration laws. We deported them because they broke the federal immigration laws. Okay. When did it become practice to bring those people back to the United States after we've sent them home to their home country? This is the hill that people like Crockett are going to die on. They want to bring Kilmar back. MSNBC, they don't want you to know what kind of person Kilmar is. They actually cut away. Now, this is kind of incredible to watch. They cut away from Donald Trump, who was trying to share what Kilmar has done and how they know that he is an MS-13 gang member. They cut away from Donald Trump's speech when he started to reveal who Kilmar Garcia actually was. Let's take a listen to this. Here we go.
Photos have emerged of Senator Van Hollen sipping what appears to be
very innocent guy. Yes.
On the IRS.
Mr. President,
on the-
in the spirit of Easter Sunday and
While we're on
Good
the
Friday.
subject, right?
Yes, of course.
So you're talking about Abrego Garcia, is that the one? Yeah. Is an illegal alien MS-13 gang member and foreign terrorist. This comes out of the State Department and very legitimate sources. I mean, I assume I'm just giving you what they handed to me, but this was supposed to be certified stuff. In 2019, Garcia was issued a deportation order. 2 separate judges affirmed Garcia was a member of MS-13, which is a gang that may be even worse than Tren de Aragua, and maybe worse. They kill people with knives because it's more painful. Very famous for the knifing and killing of 2 young 16-year-old girls walking to school one day, and they sliced them up into little pieces and killed them. That's MS-13. And 2 separate judges affirmed Garcia was a member of MS-13. When Garcia was originally arrested, he was wearing a sweatshirt with rolls of money pouring out, an MS-13 gang symbol that he was driving with 2 other known violent MS-13 gang members, 2 of the most violent members that we know of in the MS-13 gang of thugs. In 2022, Garcia was stopped by the Tennessee Highway Patrol, who was found to be transporting 7 people from Texas to Maryland, and he had no driver's license. He was driving violently. In 2020 and 2021, Garcia's wife filed for a protective order from him and said he was violent and abusive and really scary, including allegations that he punched and scratched her on the eye, left her bleeding after throwing her laptop on the floor at her, ripped her shirt, and ripped off her shorts. He then grabbed her arm, leaving very severe marks. Garcia's wife also wrote in court, "At this point, I am afraid to be close to him. I just don't want to be close. I have multiple photos and videos, how violent he can be, and all of the bruises that he's left on me." She just couldn't get anywhere near him. This is the man that the Democrats are wanting us to fly back from El Salvador to.
Okay, so MSNBC, they cut away from this speech right when he started to. They brought him out the piece of paper that lays out everything about Kilmar Garcia. MSNBC cut away from that. We weren't going to cut away from it here on Cities 92.9 because I want you to hear the truth. And Donald Trump had the truth there. There's his straight up sources, the State Department, judges, arrest records. I mean, it doesn't get much more factual than that. His own wife, saying how she didn't want to be around him, and said that she had multiple photos and videos proving that he was a very violent individual, and she didn't want to be around him. So on top of being an MS-13 gang member, and was affirmed by 2 judges that he was an MS-13 gang member, so on top of that, he's a wife beater. I mean, this is the type of guy you want to bring back to the United States. What's wrong with you? The interview featured Crockett. This interview that I was talking about earlier, they started tearing up together. And this is proof that they're not a serious media. They love the politicians. They love going to the parties. How do I know? Because I've been invited as a member of the media several times to go to these parties and drink with these politicians and have fun. And it's all like these people never grew up and never left college. That's what it is. It's the public sector, and these journalists are just so wanting to be a part of that life, and they think that they might be a part of that public sector life where they just drink and don't do any kind of work at all. And it's like college all over again. And Fang, she's offering praise. I've never seen anything like this before, to Jasmine Crockett for continuing to support democracy. Now, this was one of the last shows before, Fang was canceled. I see now why the show is no longer airing. It's not serious journalism there. Totally disingenuous for her to cry and claim that she's, fighting for democracy, when in reality she's focused on targeting a man who was democratically elected through what many consider the most undemocratic election in American history, orchestrated by her side, the Democrat Party. This was one of the most undemocratic elections on the Democrat side, next to Bernie Sanders, that election. But I got to take a quick break. You're listening to Conservative Cat Cities 92.9, the news and talk Bloomington Normal. Yeah, one of the most undemocratic elections, I would say, of our time. And that wasn't because of Donald Trump. He was democratically elected in one of the most undemocratic elections, in that Kamala Harris received 0 votes. Okay, it was undemocratic because her side orchestrated it. By Bernie Sanders, that was a pretty undemocratic, like the superdelegates and getting Hillary Clinton to be the nominee through this superdelegate thing, totally undemocratic. And she pretends that the real criminal is the people who the American people actually voted for, not Kilmar Garcia. And she couldn't be more out of touch if she tried. Great Jasmine Crockett, this Fang woman, not serious journalist. They're all about, getting cozy with these politicians and going to these parties with these politicians. And it's really gross. If you think about it, they want to avoid real life. They want to avoid the truth, and they want to hang out with each other in this really incestual group. And they are the nobodies at the lunch table, and they grew up and they're still nobodies, and they've just got money now, and they got money from you. So they're getting revenge. It's the revenge of the nerds, honestly, on the people who made something of themselves in the private sector, and they want to take out revenge on you. We've got to come back. Bloomington Normal has news media outlets that omit the truth, but they also often report outright lies. Still waiting on GLT to do some retractions. How do I know that the media operates this way? Kat, you're just speculating. You're speculating. I used to work for WGLT. You guys know that. And I left amicably. They offered me a full-time position. I didn't want to take it because there were several instances where I felt like my values were not appreciated. Like, I couldn't be myself, right? And ultimately, that's why I've told people this very publicly. I turned down the full-time position because actually what really did it was the general manager approached me and sort of cornered me with another employee of WGLT. And I felt very like they were in my face inquiring as to why I was considering a position with Great Plains Media, Cities 92.9. And they were like, well, why would you want to do that? Why would you want to do that? Because it's a job, and I am like leaving college, and I want to, explore my options and find out who I want to work for. And that's that's why I, am interviewing with multiple. It wasn't just cities at the time. After I graduated, there were multiple other job offers and interviews that I attended or that I went to. And ultimately, the people is what did it for me. I didn't want to go with WGLT because of how combative it felt. Because I was inquiring about other positions elsewhere, it felt like they were upset that I was inquiring about a position here. That's just how I felt. And I said, okay, I don't want to work for somebody like that who gets up in my face and kind of like is aggressive. I would rather work for people who are, hey, we're going to offer you this job if you like it. And I actually took the job for way less money, right? NPR, they've got that good tax money, okay, for way less money. And actually it was part-time hours is all they had available. And I said, okay, I'll just continue waitressing and slinging cocktails at B-dubs. And I said, you know what, I'm going to just, do this part-time and I'm going to, grunt it out because I would much rather work with people who appreciate me as a person. And I'm just going to be honest with you. That was my experience. People always ask me, and I make no bones about it. That's just how I came to my decision. They felt I was in a combative situation. And I said, I don't really want to work for people that are aggressive like that. I want to work for somebody that understands that, hey, we're not, entitled to you as a person. Like we're not going to, force you to be our person, right? We want you to work with us, not for us. So very, very not a healthy environment. People always ask me like, how do you know? I know the incestual back and forth between politicians and reporters. Okay. They try to befriend you. They try so that way they can have a mouthpiece for their press releases. Okay. They've all got communications directors, and their comms director sends you press releases and they hope that they print, they hope that you'll print what they want, which is in the form of a press release. Like, hey, we're introducing this bill. You should really write an article about it. You should do an article about this. And they try to get cozy so that way next time the press release hits your inbox that you're more apt to print that press release. So they get cozy with you. And clearly that Fang Crockett relationship is way too cozy. If they're up there crying together, and, she's praising Crockett for her continued fight for democracy, it's wild. Hey, good morning. You're listening to Conservative Cat Cities 92.9 News and Talk Bloomington Normal. David Hogg. David Hogg is the Democrat Party leader, and he says that there is just too much democracy. We're going to get to that story here in just a little bit. You're listening to Conservative Cat Cities 92.9. If you missed any of the rest of the show, you can always find it archived on YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, and Rumble. Earlier today, we talked about Lawmaker introducing a resolution to move the Department of Agriculture, the U.S. Department of Agriculture, to Illinois from Washington, D.C. We also talked about the protests erupting in Uptown Normal, them marching on Darin LaHood's office, his staff leaving, the constituents being left outside. He left because he had, a schedule. They confirmed that there were no representatives from these groups, from these special interest groups that had, tried to sit down and actually talk about Medicaid cuts, I'm using air quotes here. Nobody actually truly wanted to fix the problem of Medicaid cuts because they would have gotten on Darin LaHood's schedule if they actually cared about the issue. Okay. We talked about that earlier in the show. We're going to be right back. You're listening to Conservative Cat Cities 92.9. Hey, go ahead and smash that like button, share this out with your friends. I so do appreciate it. The left always finds victims, and doing so become the victims they set themselves. Left always finds the victims, and doing so becomes the victims they themselves. I don't quite understand, but I appreciate the comment. I'm trying to think of what I was talking about. I can't remember. Smash that like button, share this out with your friends. Thank you. I appreciate it. Blue nails. Yes. This is one thing that I absolutely have to get. It is something that I don't live without anymore. I love the nails. I usually get red. I got blue this time. Democrat colors. I usually get red because I'm a Republican, but we're going to get to the rest of the show here on the other side. Smash that like button, share this out with your friends. Hey, go ahead, smash that like button. We're going to come back. I don't think that we're going to be able to get to this David Hogg story. I'll probably do it tomorrow, 6 a.m. to 8 a.m. This is really incredible. The fact that he said this out loud with his mouth was insane. Here we go. Woohoo! Hey, good morning. You're listening to Conservative Cat on Cities 92.9, the news and talk Bloomington Normal. I don't think I'm going to be able to get to this story today. Rats. Tomorrow, probably we'll talk a little bit about David Hogg. He's the Democrat Party leader. And he quite literally out loud with his mouth talked about how America has too much democracy. Every so often, a member of the Democrat Party says something a little too on the nose that all there is to do is chuckle and appreciate it for what it is. They're saying the quiet part out loud. So throughout 2024, the Democrats and the media said that democracy was literally on the ballot. It's literally on the ballot. And that's why you have to vote for the people who are running Kamala Harris over Donald Trump. So you have to vote against Donald Trump in favor for the people who control Joe Biden and then later Kamala Harris. The American people still voted for Donald Trump. Now you have a Democrat Party leader, David Hogg, saying that democracy is the problem. So we're going to get to that maybe tomorrow, bright and early, 6 a.m. You guys have a blessed day. Bye-bye. Love you.